We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Rye Russell from Weedbudz Radio in Maine.
Welcome aboard, Rye, and I look forward to working with you. You know, we've got lots of news this week from your state of Maine to D.C. to Canada and all the way to California, too.
Well, let's start in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Only 1 week ago, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the MORE Act, symbolically legalizing cannabis, but we all know the Senate is not expected to even vote on that during this lame duck session. The House did approve another bill this week that will in part allow scientists access to researching cannabis in legal states.
And you know, Rye, what's interesting about this bill is that the two sponsors of the bill, one was Democrat Earl Blumenauer from Oregon, a cannabis advocate, and the other was a Republican prohibitionist, Andy Harris from Maryland. It's called the Medical Marijuana Research Act. And if this moves on to the Senate, it has a better chance to at least get to the floor for a vote, since both sides do agree that there needs to be more research on this plant than exists. From the University of Mississippi, the only federally supported research location for cannabis in the U.S. over the past 50 years.
Well, we all know that the cannabis grown there might be a little bit more like hemp than the high-grade stuff being sold in the legal states. One of those legal states is my home state of Maine, where cannabis sales have now passed potato sales. There has been $221 million of cannabis sold in Maine and only $184 million for potatoes. This is big news out of the Pine Tree State.
I know a lot of those potato farmers up in Presque Isle area are freaking out right now, but they do have another crop they can look at. In the meantime, let's go down to New York for the Green Market Report with Debra Borchardt. Debra?
Thanks, guys. The cannabis industry is ending 2020 with a bang as financial deals are closing on a high note. This week, Weedmaps announced it was going public through a deal with the Silver Spike SPAC, which is a special purpose acquisition company. The stock will be listed on the NASDAQ marketplace. The most eye-popping thing about this deal was the $1.5 billion valuation given to Weedmaps. Now that's a pretty sweet premium considering the company is on track to deliver just $160 million in revenue this year. While that's not shabby, it's a big jump from $160 million to $1.5 billion. Grow Generation increased its offering from the recently announced $125 million. They bumped that up to $150 million and priced $5 million of its shares at $30 a share. The company said it expects to close on this offering on or about December 11th. Now the shares fell on that news because investors are getting concerned about dilution. And in not so good news, employees of Canopy Growth got a call from the Grinch as 200 of them learned that they would no longer have a job. Canopy Growth said it would cease business at several sites and basically end all their outdoor growing operations in Canada. The company also said it expects to record an estimated total pre-tax charge of approximately $350 million to $400 million in the third and fourth quarters of fiscal 2021. And that's the big news this week. I'm Debra Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Another new legal state is New Jersey. They finally settled their plans. New Jersey governor and lawmakers are finally moving forward with their plans for cannabis legalization. And they say that the bill has strong provisions regarding a much talked about social equity program. We know that cannabis won the ballot in New Jersey, and it's great to finally see a deal being made amongst all parties of New Jersey government.
And you know, what's amazing is I'm pretty sure you can walk around New Jersey now or after this bill gets passed with 6 ounces. That's amazing. A pretty big amount just to walk around. When was the last time, Rye, you hung around or walked around with 6 ounces in your pocket?
Well, I don't think I ever have.
All right. Well, another state with a flourishing medical program is Florida. The Sunshine State already has 450,000 medical patients, and now there's a movement to get adult use on the next ballot for 2022. Now, one of the 5 Republicans who voted for the MORE Act is a rep named Matt Gaetz. There is, of course, a Make It Legal in Florida movement now that's starting to collect signatures for an amendment that will get legalization of cannabis and that question on the ballot for 2022. They've already collected 555,000 signatures. You'd think that would be enough, but no, they need a few 100,000 more in order to get that question to voters on the next election.
Well, Jimmy, speaking of Florida, a man who spent 31 years in jail for possession has finally been released. A 71-year-old Florida man served 31 years of a 90-year sentence for the sale of marijuana. The gentleman finally rejoined his family this past Tuesday, surviving what the Last Prisoner Project, who is credited with assisting in this gentleman's release, claims has been the longest non-violent cannabis sentence served to date. The gentleman was only 40 years old in 1989 when a judge convicted him and sentenced him to 90 years. And even back then, Jimmy, the typical sentence was only 12 to 17 years.
Crazy, crazy times. And I hope a lot more of these people that are still incarcerated are let free, thanks to our friends at the Last Prisoner Project, Steve D'Angelo. And speaking of Steve D'Angelo and his family, according to Weed Week in California, Harborside continues to push their federal tax case against the IRS. Now, that case goes before the Ninth Circuit of Appeals in February, and basically it's challenging the constitutionality of the cursed 280E provision of the tax law that prohibits cannabis companies from taking business deductions just like any other business. Here's our accounting expert, Rick Ledee from Accounting Buds, on what 280E is all about.
There's a lot of pieces of the equation in accounting before you even get to the tax calculations that you have to do correctly in order to be able to even deduct anything. 280E, for those that don't understand, that aren't familiar with it, really relates to what you can and cannot deduct for cannabis businesses. And the short answer is there's not much that you can deduct.
That's why the Harborside principals of Steve and Andrew D'Angelo are challenging that in court. And even though they've lost a few decisions, they're trying to get it heard all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, Andrew D'Angelo, the co-founder of the Last Prisoner Project and the co-CEO of Harborside with his brother Steve, will be joining myself and the Green Rush host David Rabinowitz on Friday afternoon live, The Green Rush Show at 4 p.m. on Friday. Now, let's go to Washington, D.C. for that report from Vote Pro Podcast, Phil Adams. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC report. On the heels of the MORE Act, the House of Representatives voted this week to approve the Medical Marijuana Research Act. Passing with bipartisan support, the new legislation is designed to facilitate and expand cannabis research by allowing scientists to access cannabis from state legal dispensaries. The bill would also direct the Drug Enforcement Administration to grant more licenses to growers and would remove limits on the number of cultivators who may register to grow cannabis for research purposes. In an unlikely alliance, Pro Cannabis Representative Earl Blumenauer of Oregon teamed up with staunch anti-cannabis Republican Andy Harris of Maryland to co-sponsor the bill. Harris, who voted against the MORE Act, noting that although he and Blumenauer could not be further apart on the issue of legalization, said, quote, "We agree 100% that we need to do this research." Whether the Senate will take up the bill during the current term remains unclear. A new poll reveals that 2/3 of Americans, including more than half of Republicans, now support federal legalization of cannabis. The survey, conducted by Morning Consult Politico, found that 66% of respondents support passage of the MORE Act, with 47% strongly supporting it. In a separate YouGov poll, 7 in 10 Americans, including 57% of Republicans, say they favor expunging the records of people with nonviolent cannabis convictions. The U.S. Transportation Security Administration posted a zinger-laden message on Instagram in response to National Brownie Day. In a warning to travelers who may be thinking about packing a stash in their carry-ons, the TSA's cautionary post includes such pun-infused language as, quote, "Let's be blunt. We are required to refer your product to our local law enforcement officers. We leave it up to these professionals to hash it out, and in this case, it isn't a joint effort," end quote. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
One of the largest North American supplement retailers, The Vitamin Shoppe, is now the first national retailer to carry a full line of hemp-derived CBD wellness products from media personality and lifestyle superstar Martha Stewart. This new brand was created in collaboration between Ontario's Canopy Growth and New York marketing firm Marquee Brands. So Jimmy, first we had Tyson, now we have Martha. It'll be interesting to see what other personalities find their way into the growing cannabis market.
Well, there's quite a few sports figures involved with cannabis already. Al Harrington, you've got Marvin Washington, you've got Leonard Marshall, the former New York Giants, and of course now you've got everybody's favorite homemaker, Martha Stewart. And I'm going to be running right out to those vitamin shops and check it out. But in the meantime, let's go north of the border to MJ Biz Daily's international own Solomon Israel for today's Canadian Cannabis Report. Solomon?
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canopy Growth has announced another round of cutbacks this week, closing 4 more production facilities across Canada and cutting 220 jobs. The facility closures also include an end to Canopy's outdoor cultivation in Canada. Canopy has lost more than 1.5 billion Canadian dollars over its last 4 quarters. The province of Ontario is once again speeding up new cannabis store approvals. The province plans to issue 20 new licenses per week, 80 per month, which should help store counts catch up to demand in Canada's biggest market. Roughly 300 store licenses have been issued in Ontario to date. And a major Canadian dispensary chain plans to list its shares on the NASDAQ exchange in the United States. High Tide, which has 67 stores across 4 Canadian provinces, says it wants to attract new investors and pave the way for mergers and acquisitions in the US. The company already earns almost a quarter of its revenue in the United States through its marijuana accessory and CBD e-commerce business. You can read those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel for Marijuana Business Daily.
The story tonight qualifies for the strange but true category. Hey, Ry, imagine driving along Route 95, the Maine Turnpike, and you look to the side and you see a refrigerator on the side of the road. You'd stop and be curious to look inside, wouldn't you?
If I didn't know any better, I might even claim that refrigerator.
Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. It was filled with cannabis flower. Sure enough, a Texas law enforcement officer hauled it back to the department and posted the following on their Facebook page. Someone dropped their refrigerator loaded with marijuana on southbound Interstate 45, adding, "To whomever lost their valuables, please come and claim it at the Ferris Police Department and we'll be more than happy to assist you." So, Ry, do you think someone actually claimed it?
I really hope not in Texas, but if somebody did, there's going to be a lot of fun talk on the social media, I think, pretty soon.
Absolutely. And no one did claim it. And in the meantime, that is Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Ry Russell from Weedbudz Radio.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.